The room reeked of whiskey and sweat, the dim light barely cutting through the haze of smoke. JS sat slumped on the tattered leather couch, a cigarette burning between his fingers, the ash clinging stubbornly to the tip. Outside, the muffled roar of the city seeped through the cracked windows. The party had ended hours ago, but he hadn't bothered to kick out the stragglers. They lay scattered across the floor like forgotten marionettes, twisted in poses of drunken stupor. Once, JS was the golden god of rock and roll, a force of nature that electrified arenas and left thousands screaming his name. Now, he was a faded legend, a ghost haunting his own success. The gold records on the wall seemed to mock him, their sheen dulled by years of neglect. A decade ago, his band, known simply as TK, had ruled the charts, their songs anthems for a generation. Now, the only audience left was the silence, punctuated by the distant honking of traffic. He lifted the whiskey bottle to his lips and let the bitter liquid scorch his throat. His hand trembled as he reached for his guitar, the once beloved instrument now gathering dust beside him. He plucked a single string, the note wavering like his resolve, and let his head fall back against the couch. It hadn't always been this way. In the beginning, it was all raw energy and passion, backyard gigs and stolen amps, late-night songwriting sessions that spilled into dawn. JS and his bandmates, DK on bass, LM on drums, and VR on lead guitar, had been inseparable, a brotherhood forged in sweat and ambition. Their first album, raw and reckless, exploded like a Molotov cocktail, and suddenly, they were everywhere. Radio stations, magazine covers, and sold-out arenas. But success came at a cost. The pressure to stay on top was relentless, the touring grueling, and the parties unending. Cocaine and whiskey became constants, numbing the exhaustion and loneliness that gnawed at JS like a starving wolf. He remembered the night he smashed his favorite guitar on stage, the crowd screaming as he tore through the encore with bloody fingers. It became an iconic moment, the chaos captured on camera, but behind the scenes, it was a harbinger of his unraveling. As the years passed, the band's chemistry faded, poisoned by ego and resentment. VR quit first, citing creative differences, but everyone knew it was because he couldn't stand watching JS drown himself night after night. DK and LM hung on a while longer, but even they couldn't ignore the decay. After a disastrous tour marked by canceled shows and incoherent performances, TK disbanded. JS embarked on a solo career, but the magic was gone, his voice cracked and worn like old leather. Sitting alone now, he thought about that last phone call from LM, who tried to pull him back from the edge. "Get clean," she'd begged. "We'll put the band back together. One last album. For us. For the fans." JS had laughed it off, convinced he didn't need them, convinced the world still wanted him. But the world had moved on. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with a news alert. VR dead at 43 from overdose. JS stared at it, unblinking, his chest tight. They hadn't spoken in years, but the grief hit him like a tidal wave, drowning him in guilt. He remembered the last fight, VR telling him to get help, JS shouting that he didn't need saving. The cigarette burned down to his fingers, searing his skin, but he barely felt it. Instead, he picked up his guitar and started to play, soft, broken chords that filled the empty space with something raw and aching. He sang for the first time in months, his voice rasping but honest, unguarded. As dawn crept through the windows, JS knew it was time to make a choice: keep drowning or learn to breathe again. He didn't know if the world would ever hear his voice again, but for the first time in years, he wasn't singing for them. He was singing for himself, and maybe that was enough.